got to move on. We are on absolutely on chapter 3. Down a second. Working off of my phone, and so it's a little bit more complex. Okay. So we started discussing these 3 stages, and just to review them, the first stage, which is the stage we called iskafia. Iskafia means that a person has to subdue their own feelings, they have to subdue their own desires, because at that stage, a person's really in a state of evil. They still need to escape from Egypt. And we say the term escape because that's really the process. You can't really work with yourself until you've escaped from evil. Got to get out of the prison before you start rebuilding. So that's the first stage of iskafia. And that is that's a stage where you really have to put yourself aside, because the point is really not to focus on oneself. As soon as you start focusing on yourself, you get wrapped up in yourself, and that's when you get pulled into your desires. I saw a very powerful line from a different mimer where the Rebbe says that there's a difference between intellect and will, ratzon, desire. Intellect, you have an idea. The idea exists outside of yourself. The concept, somebody else can figure out the same concept. And even if you forget the concept, outside yourself. But a desire is dependent upon yourself. And it only exists as long as the person wants it to exist. So I'm sure as children, we all had certain desires, whether it was a doll or it was a toy or a car or whatever it was. We had those desires, but now we have no interest whatsoever in that desire. It really doesn't make any difference to us whatsoever. And at the time, we may have had a massive temper tantrum because we couldn't get that particular car, or somebody else took it away, or it broke, or something like that. But that ratzon, that desire, no longer exists. As soon as we separated ourselves from it, the desire itself has gone. And that same stage of iskafia means to subdue and push those things away in order to be able to move onwards. The second stage, we said, is the stage of ishapcha, itapcha, to litapech, to transform. And that stage of transformation is one of working within oneself, considering one's capabilities and one's qualities, one's deficiencies, and that's one really focusing on oneself. And as Susan brought up, psychotherapy, that whole process is the process of turning over any of our negative elements into goodness, to be able to focus and to drive ourselves in a proper manner. So a good description for this is one where a person might be an artist of some type, but the question is whether the artist is being driven by the art, or the art is a tool that they are using. So, for example, if any of you have read Chaim Potok's books, they're all awful. I can't stand them. I used to give a class at Seattle Pacific University on My Name is Asher Lev. And the problem with Asher Lev in that story is the artist who is driven by his art. It's because the problem with him is he has no control over the art. He has no control over himself. And so he ends up doing things that are very inappropriate for his parents, and very inappropriate even to himself, even just self-disrespecting, because of the fact that he has no control. The art is meant to be, or any skill, any talent that we have is meant to be driven by us, as opposed to it driving us. And that's true of any talent, any quality, or even deficiency. Again, the point is that the deficiency should not be controlled by us. Susan, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment. Had I been studying Torah when I was in my 30s, I may have not needed to go to an analyst or to have psychotherapy. I wanted to make that comment.
Okay.
Now, in retrospect, looking back, you know what I mean.
There's a deep appreciation that you have now because of it, though. If you were learning Torah in your 30s, you might not have appreciated it as much as you do now. So there's that. And then there's the third stage. The third stage is the stage of reaching an element of absolute fulfillment, not self-fulfillment, because there's no longer a sense of self. A person is able to truly and absolutely transcend to get the point of what we refer to as bitul, to pitachlis, to be able to get to total and absolute self-transcendence, to the point of self-nullification. So this really, really phenomenal process. We said that process is something that, and we're going to talk about the fact that it happens every single day. It's not just something that happens once in history. It's something that goes on every day. And that's what the Rebbe talks about in chapter 3, and is going to give the example of the angels that we speak of in prayer as an example. So our daily prayer functions in much the same cyclical manner. Prayer begins at its earliest with Modani, I acknowledge. So the Modani, of course, is the basic acknowledgement of God's creating us and giving us life. And that's said while waking up. And Shacharit begins with the words Hodu Lashem, Kiru Vishmo, praised is God. And again, there's the same concept of Hodu, basic acknowledgement, just a simple thanks with no details. Both of these expressions denote nullification, and this nullification is connected with the climax of prayer, the Amidah, which is said in absolute self-nullification. So you once again have putting oneself not down, but aside by nullifying oneself, saying that my existence is dependent upon God. And I thank God basically for everything without going into details quite yet. And that's the beginning of prayer. And that leads to the climax of prayer, which is the Amidah. And now we're going to discuss a little bit how that works. So we can discuss these two stages with the description the prophet Yecheskel gives of the angels of the Merkavah, the angels of the chariot. He writes, Ba'amdam ta'pena kanfehen. When they stood, their wings were silenced. And so when we say Ba'amdam, we're saying similar to the Amidah. Prior to that, the pasuk says, "V'kol kanfehem kekol mayim rabim." The sound of their wings was the sight of mighty waters. So what's going on here? What are they talking about? What is these angels and their wings and the sounds and the silence? What's going on over here? So the Rebbe explains, the angels' great comprehension of godliness causes them to be consumed with desire to cleave to God with great excitement. Hence, and I heard behind me a great loud roar. So the excitement, the roar, the mighty waters and all that, that is the angels getting very, very, very excited because their recognition of godliness, their comprehension of godliness, their cognition leads them to be very, very excited, to be moved, and to the point that there's noise, there's excitement, there's passion, there's movement. But when they receive, the Rebbe continues, when they receive a revelation of godliness that is beyond their comprehension, reaching even to the level of Keter or Sovev, then they stand in silence and their wings are stilled. The beyond comprehension causes them to be nullified, where the excitement ceases. The excitement ceases because they are no longer capable of being excited about something. At this point, they are totally nullified. And the Rebbe continues. He says they have no independent energy to be excited with consuming love. At this point, the revelation is so beyond them that they are totally nullified within themselves, so there's no feeling of self. Instead, they're in a state of total nullification. Likewise, the pasuk says the angels carry the throne and are carried with the throne. What does that mean? Nosot et akisei uminusaot im akisei. What does that mean? First, they carry the throne with their energetic love. And once their wings are stilled, they become null and are carried with the throne. So that's that process. And so likewise, this is what we're supposed to be doing in davening. this process of, on the one hand, you work up the intellectual comprehension, but the intellectual comprehension leads to a certain flaw. It leads to a sense of self. I understand. I'm excited. I have these emotions. And the more I that's involved, the more self that's involved, the less nullification, the less ultimate connection there is. But at the same time, you need that intellectual drive, because otherwise there's nothing there. If you stay at the modani stage of life and you never grow, then you haven't gotten anywhere. And so it's this constant process. So that's what the Rebbe explains. This experience is meant to occur in our prayers as well.
Rabbi, you're saying this happens every day? You're saying that this occurs every day?
We are meant to apply this every single day. Whether we do it every day is a different story.
Okay.
It's always very important to point out there's the theoretical and there's where we put ourselves into it. But every single day.
We do say Modeh Ani every morning, right?
Yes. That
right.
Absolutely.
Susan, understand that when you wake up, you say the blessing, Modeh Ani, I am back. My soul's re-entered my body.
Right. And we're saying, I am back, but I know that I am back because God, you put me here. So that's right. The basic acknowledgement that my existence is not my own. But if you stay on that very simple level of recognition of godliness and you don't develop it further, you don't end up building these, what we're going to talk about, the wings, the two wings that we have, which are the love and fear of God, which elevate us. There has to be this constant process. So prayer is built in such a way that it's meant to bring us in that direction. So he says, this experience is meant to occur in our prayers as well. The wings refer to our emotions of love and fear of God. You have the right side, which is chesed, the left side, which is gevura. Chesed is love and giving, and gevura is discipline, fear. And fear means basically the withholding ourselves from doing what is wrong, sur meira, to stay away from evil. At the same time, chesed is the giving. We try to do things for God as well. We do the mitzvot and at the best of our ability. And these are our driving engines. So in Psukei de Zimra, Birchot Kriyat Shema and Kriyat Shema, sections of prayer, our contemplation on godliness ignites love and fear of God in an excited and passionate manner. So through the prayers, we build up the feelings of in Psukei de Zimra, we start talking about the world at large. We talk about God's creation as he provides all of creation with their needs. We talk about the mountains and the seas, and we talk about all these beautiful things in our world, in the Hallelujahs. And we talk about, the fact that God loves the Jewish people in particular through the Az Yashir. And he saves us from Paro and takes us through the Red Sea. Then you go into the brachot before Shema, where you start talking about the feelings of the angels, the more spiritual beings, and then Avat Olam is the feeling of the soul and the soul's connection with God. So you're going through this entire journey. And this journey is meant to energize us. It's not just basically, okay, God, you're great, you're great, you're great. How many times do you have to say God's great? But the point is for us to energize our own emotions through thinking about these ideas that we speak about. And then we come to the Amidah. We say Shema, get all the way through there, and we get to Amidah. And in Amidah, even the verbal prayer itself is expressed in a manner of total nullification. You walk into a shul, at least a gishmak shul, and there's noise. Throughout davening, people are davening. You mentioned this person says this sentence out loud. This person says that sentence out loud. There's energy in a shul in general. I hope, like I said, a gishmak shul, there's energy. Then the Amidah comes, Shmona Esrei, and the place is silence, total silence. This is the climax of tefillah. In theory, we should be building these energies and should get more and more excited and more louder and louder and louder. Instead, at the climax of tefillah, we get to the point of silence, even verbal nullification. We stand, we don't move. And that's this total nullification And the Rebbe says something very powerful. He said, this is why we begin the Amidah with the words, my master, open my lips and let my mouth tell your praise. Tefillah. We should say that the way even before Hodel Hashem Kiro Bishmo. We should say, God, I'm about to praise you. Please help me do so. But when do we do it? We do it right before the Amidah. And the reason why is because in, again, a best case circumstance, we are in such a state of total nullification. We are saying that, God, I cannot speak before you. You open my mouth and you let my mouth tell your praise. And so what we're saying, as we say inside, God, you open my lips as I cannot. Let your praises be, yagid means not just to tell, but to draw down. Let your praises be draw down and flow through the mechanism of my mouth. I am now becoming a ventriloquist. The subject doesn't exist as an independent entity. He is in a state of complete nullification, self-nullification. Isaac, go ahead.
Yeah, question. Why by Mincha do we add Kishem Hashem Ekra?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I
Excellent
keep
question.
looking at it. Vusep is Mincha, you add the extra pasuk.
In Chabad we don't say that.
They don't have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting question. I don't know the answer. It's a very, very interesting question. But what this points out is something really, really incredible. And Cesar, I'll get to it in just a second. In the Amidah, we're asking for our needs. And so now the whole request for our needs has a completely, completely different meaning. We're not asking for our needs because we want them. We're saying, God, I don't exist. I don't exist as an independent entity. These things are needed for you.
Rabbi, we can't hear you.
These things are to be able to sing for praises. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear
you're
me?
okay now.
Going.
You're okay now.
We can hear you, but every sentence, when you're ending it, it's kind of stretching out. And it's
Okay.
like a magnetic voice or
Your
something.
connection was unstable.
Okay. So what we're saying is that because I don't exist as an independent entity, when I'm asking for the needs that I want and I need, I'm not asking it for myself. I'm asking it for you, for God. Saying, I will be able to draw down your praises through you giving me these needs. So it really brings a whole different level of appreciation to the whole Amidah. Caesar, go ahead. You had a question?
No, it's just a clarification. As far as them
Sure.
don't say, they only say on Hashem Sefatay Tiftach in all the three Amidot. They don't say anything else.
In Ashkenaz, you don't. Okay, in Chabad, we do. Okay.
No,
That's
no,
very
I'm saying
interesting. No.
the
What?
Eidot HaMizrach only says Hashem Sefatay. They don't say anything else other than that as a start.
Okay, so they're with Chabad on that Nakuda. That's good to know. It'd be interesting research on this whole thing. Okay, Ezra, you have a comment, question?
No.
Okay. All right, Susan, go ahead.
Yes, repeat what you just said more slowly, please.
Sure. Because we are now in a state of self-nullification, we're asking for our needs, but we're not asking them for ourselves. We're asking them because they are what God wants in his world. We're saying, if you give me what you need, what I need, I will be able to draw down your praises in this world.
Okay. All right.
So I'm not saying that I want a $1 million lottery ticket for myself. I'm doing it. I'm asking God because I don't exist for myself. I'm asking you for my sustenance so that I can bring down your praises. so that I can accomplish what I need to in this world. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm asking for health, not because I want to be able to feel good and run to the beach and do whatever that I'm doing that. I'm asking for health so that I can serve you in a full manner, etc. It just brings a new depth to the whole question of asking God for stuff. Why are we asking God for stuff? God is obviously so much beyond this, but we're not asking God for stuff to make ourselves feel good. We're asking for a much deeper element. But anyway, getting back to this process, it says the nullification that we're talking about, and specifically with the angels, but it's also applicable to us because the Amidah is a very, very high level of godliness, especially when we built ourselves to that level. This comes as a result of a revelation that is beyond intellectual comprehension. And we're trying to explain, of course, the whole idea of keter is silence that is beyond intellect. And there's silence below intellect because I don't know. And then there's silence that's beyond intellect because the experience is deeper and greater and broader. So this occurs as a result of two things. Number one, and due to the intense revelation of godliness, he feels that his level of divine service, no matter how lofty, is of no consequence at all. He is therefore not in a state of desire or excitement anymore. So no matter what he's done, because when you're talking about God, God's the infinite. So if you think about an infinite plane, an infinite movement, no matter where you are on that plane, you are infinitely distant from any other point on that plane. So your place in a cosmic perspective has no consequence because it's all infinity. It's all beyond. So this person has gotten to a point, even if he's done so at the highest of spiritual levels, at this point he reaches self-nullification because he realized that no matter what I've done, God is beyond everything, and so therefore it's about God, it's not about me. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay. How can you say that God is beyond everything when he's inside of us? You're confusing me.
We have these two different levels that we keep talking about, keep going back and forth between them. Memale, as God is within, and Sovev, as God is transcendent. And God does both at the same time, because God has both elements.
Okay.
Right? And God's even beyond Sovev, he's even beyond transcendent. And that's the reason why God can combine both of these in one, but that's not what we're discussing here. But here we're just talking about Sovev, we're talking about as in this level of infinity and transcendence, the person is, no matter as high as he is, and as we're going to talk later, as low as he might be, doesn't make a difference. What does make us a difference? That you have a relationship with God, that God chose you. That's what makes a difference. So it's not about you.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the transcendence that takes place during the Shemon Esrei Hamidah is the same as when Moshe Rabbeinu is up in Sinai. It almost is the same kind of, we're trying to attain that kind of level during the Shemon Esrei. Am I correct?
I believe so.
In other words, where Hashem is talking directly to Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to attain during the Amidah. The silence.
I believe so. That's correct.
Okay.
So the second point that the Rebbe says is that since the revelation is that of Sovev, Sovev is again transcendent. And Sovev exists below as it does above. On all levels, Atzilut to Asiya, it doesn't make a difference what level you're on. It is absolutely, it's the great equalizer. Big, small, don't, right? It only needs to be drawn out of its state of concealment. Therefore, there's no state of desire because Sovev exists here with him. So there's no passionate excitement because there's no trying to get to something because what is an existence of what is. Sovev exists here with him. There's a recognition. So therefore, there's the absolute nullification to the recognition that, like you said, I am talking with God. So the Rebbe continues. It says, so this is the state divine service in the Amidah. Not only is this state of revelation beyond his comprehension, he cannot even say that he feels its existence, but cannot grasp its essence. Comprehension simply is not a vehicle for its revelation. So there's no element of comprehension that can be described here whatsoever. Still, it affects him. There is an impact of some type, because we're not talking about transcendence in a way that it's distance in such a way of not having any relationship whatsoever. There is a relationship. There is something. There is an effect. So Daniel says, and I alone saw the vision, and the men who were with me did not see it, yet a great dread fell upon them. The sages elaborate that even though they did not see, their mazel saw, and even though, and the mazel refers to the essence of the soul, which is completely above vestment within the body, including intellectual comprehension. So people had no intellectual comprehension. They had no understanding of what was going on. And still, these men were impacted by this great dread that fell upon them, even though they couldn't understand. Likewise, during the Amidah, the godly revelation is completely beyond cognition. Yet its impact can be felt even by the external limbs and in the spiritual garments of thought, speech, and action, which are the elements of, as we prepare ourselves for the Amidah, and as we stand and we completely focus, our speech is quiet, our standing is in one place, we don't move, and that's what the Amidah is representative of. And finally, the Rebbe says, this state of nullification is linked with the simple acknowledgement stated at the beginning of prayer, Modeh and Odel Hashem. Prayer must begin in a state of nullity, and it is through beginning in that original state that one can later attain the higher stage of the Amidah. So that's with regards to prayer. And on Friday, we're going to really, really hit an incredible, incredible concept, which is one that is applicable to every single one of us, every single day, how we apply this into our lives and how we apply this into as we serve God on a constant basis. So with that, thank you for a pleasure, and
Thank you, Rabbi. Yes.
Absolutely.